nice to be here with you and with everyone who is here. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to this wonderful webinar. I love the topic of emotional connection, whether it is on Zoom, in person, in our work relationships, or in our life. I love this topic. So here we are in beautiful Fullerton in Orange County, California. It's a bit hazy today, but we can still see the mountains. Ramin and I, we are not only colleagues, but we also live in the same city in Fullerton. And occasionally we walk around the golf course that is here. So it's really beautiful. We're also excited to having you here with us and share the power of emotional engagement as the fundamental force of productivity. And I put the word emotion into engagement because that's what it is. You know, emotion is the most powerful thing in the room, and it's also the most powerful agent of change. And in order to change emotion, we have to go into emotion. But we'll do that a little later. So right now, we'd like to check in and see how's everybody's doing. And so, Ramin, how are you doing?
Fantastic, and welcome also to all the people on the webinar. That's fantastic to have you all here, and it's just really great to be talking about this topic and to be doing it on Zoom, because we're talking about Zoom and about interactions on Zoom. So we, Lola and I, are Zooming with each other. So we'll see if we can make this interaction as productive as we like to make it. And with that, I'll turn it back to you to move with the program.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So the first thing we thought we would like to ask is this question of get a sense of where you are in your relationships at work. So I'm going to share our first poll, and I want you to think about your relationship and how you are at this moment with important work relationships in your life. Generally happy, okay, great. Struggling, yeah, absolutely, understandable. Generally satisfied, okay, we see that. All right. So, so we can see that people are mostly generally happy. Ramin, you want to take over?
Sure. Let's talk about this a little bit. And certainly it's understandable that number of you are struggling, as many people are during these very difficult times. There's a lot of different things going on out there, and it's also good to see that we have a number of people who would normally say that they're generally happy. Which means that they're in a good place to think through their interactions on Zoom and work through these issues. So it's good to start with a little bit of check-in, and now we sort of see where everybody is. Thankfully, we don't have anyone sort of in the. Well, I guess we have one person sort of in the confused state. That's okay. If you're not confused, then you're not awake. This is a very difficult set of times.
Yeah.
So I guess it's brave of you to put that there. I appreciate that. So with that, let's talk a little bit about emotions. Lola, if you have some comments on these as well, and talking about some of the connections and emotional connections, and why is all that important to the conversation about Zoom?
Yes, it is important. So we really depend on our relationships at work. The way we are productive and engaging with each other it depends on how connected we feel. The other day I was sharing something with Ramin, and it was so embarrassing to me, something I did, and he was right there for me. He was able to understand me, and even though in moments when he was going in maybe a different direction, I was able to bring him in and say, like, this is what I need. And we were able to connect, and we were able to feel more secure with each other. So our relationships really give us the strength to move forward in life and to be there and to take risks in life. And when I was developing the emotional connection process, I really looked at all the theories out there. And one of the things that really stood up for me is the attachment theory. And what attachment theory says is that our longing for a felt sense of connection is really a primary need, especially when we are threatened. And we are threatened in this time. So it makes sense that we are more anxious, we are more stressed, we get easily triggered because there's an inability for us to be in the same room, in the same office, in the same place. And that felt sense of connection is lost for us. So when we come out on Zoom meetings, it becomes so transactional. We forget to just be there for each other and just create that emotional connection, emotional presence. So as emotional disconnection and emotional isolation is really inherently traumatizing for us. When we are disconnected from each other, we can't function really well. And so there's people who has said that, oh, my relationship, maybe I feel confused, or maybe I feel struggling. I'm generally satisfied, and those people who said, I'm really happy, generally happy with my relationship, they can feel the difference. They know the difference. So when we are emotionally disconnected, we can't really function. Where we need people that we depend on, and we need to be connected. We need this emotional connection. It is wired into our nervous system. It's not a cultural, and it's not about cultural context. It just, that's who we are. We are human beings. We are social bonding mammals. So connection with others is the best survival strategies that we've ever came up with as species. So isn't that interesting to us, for us to know that in this virus that's happening, physical connection with others is challenged. But I trust we can still find ways to stay emotionally connected. I don't know, Ramin, if you've seen this video on YouTube that is going around. Somebody showed it to me last night. People in Italy standing out on their balconies and singing to each other. They're singing to each other. Isn't that amazing?
It is beautiful.
Yeah, it is beautiful. I don't know what we do in Fullerton. We can say, like, would you like to have some tea or something in Fullerton? But we can really find a way to share explicitly of how much we care about each other, how important we are to each other, and how much we need each other, especially in the moments. We can really become much more comfortable in these Zoom meetings, create that emotional connection. It's tough sometimes to come to Zoom meetings when we are stressed ourselves. It's tough for us to come and be in that emotional balance when we feel embarrassed or when we feel disconnected ourselves. And so we start to figure out, like we come with already a barrier in ourselves. But what we learn from the attachment theory is that when we know how to tune into our emotions, how to share our emotions, we create that safe haven for others to share their emotions. And they need that safe haven because that calms the nervous system. It gives us that emotional balance when we do that. And it helps us to manage distress. So we can stay engaged with other stress. We can find a way through it rather than avoiding it, shutting it down, or fighting it. So we need that safe haven for us to be able to tune into other people's emotions and give them that space where they can feel safe to do that and be vulnerable with each other. For example, I can say to people, thank you for sharing. You're so strong and courageous to share your concerns or your feelings. I can really see how much this relationship means to you. I can see how much this project means to you. I can see how much you care. And that brings us emotional balance. Emotional balance really helps us to develop a coherent, positive sense of self, where we can look inside, feel our need, listen to our needs, and know how to get those needs met with other people. When we do that, we can take risks because we know that we have each other's back. We're not alone in the world. It gives us confidence, and we can be open to be creative and innovative. Attachment is not just about comfort. Attachment is about growth. When people have that felt sense of safety and secure base, it primes our competence, our autonomy, and effective dependency. We've been taught in the world that dependency is weak, and it's a big mistake because we need people at work and we depend on them. So when we recognize this dependency, we can share and we can create effective dependency where we know we can lean on each other. So this is not an abstract idea. This is not just a theory. It has really been born out of thousands of studies. And social psychologists, relational theorists, and our interventions that we use in the process show that when people are emotionally connected, they are much more engaged in meetings. They collaborate with others. They share information willingly and openly. They become more productive and creative. They listen better. They learn better. They start to trust each other. I was doing a session recently, and you could just see a change in people's facial expression when one person says to the other, when you didn't show up in that meeting, I felt alone. I felt like not important. And the other person says, you are important. And I just want to tell you that I didn't show up not because you're not important, but because I had something else. I got stressed. I got disconnected. I was struggling with my own thing. And so when people are able to share this openly, they create a stronger bond. And so the whole dynamic changes when people feel that sense of connection. Ramin, do you have anything to add?
I think these are just wonderful thoughts that you are sharing with people. It really is about this notion that we have become very transactional at work anyway, and Zoom just simply adds to it. Zoom just simply creates an environment where you're to show up at a certain point, get on a Zoom call with everyone, with an agenda, with a transaction, and I've even been on Zoom calls, I don't know if people on the webinar have, where the screen is already shared, right? There's already sort of whatever it is that the person wants to present is already on there. So there is no time for anything. And so I think the challenge, which I'm sure everyone here on this call or others are facing, is how do we make those small connections that create the safe spaces, that gives people, it used to be that if we saw someone sort of struggling, we would just get up and like close the door and say, what's going on? Tell me what's happening. How can I help? Well, it's hard to do that on Zoom. And it's hard to sort of take that moment when you see someone. So I think it's sort of a perfect time to ask sort of our second question, which is, how do we engage people? And I know you want to say a couple of things about it before asking the question. So
I think it's really great. What you're saying is Zoom does create that a little bit of distance and uncomfortable, because here you are, you're looking at people's faces and you want to get through tasks, but you want to create also safe space and moments of that connection. And so I think when we are really tuned into the facial expression and maybe tuned into engagement and disengagement, what people say, validating people's ideas and feelings throughout the meeting, we can create that safe space. So I do want to launch our second poll, which we would like to get your feedback, is what some of the rituals you do on Zoom to enhance the quality of your interactions. And you can select multiple answers. Share story, yeah, to get people comfortable, excellent. Words of recognition, that's excellent. People want to feel valued, so absolutely. Focus on the big problem or urgent matters, okay. Connect through sharing challenges or anxieties. Again, when we're able to do that, that creates a positive interaction where people do not feel alone. And we're obsessed in the emotional connection process. We're obsessed of people feeling alone. So we don't want people to feel alone. We want to make sure. So, all right, I'll just wait a couple more minutes, have everyone check in. Yeah, of course. So I'm going to go ahead and share the results.
It's really great to see. It's really great to see the results now. So it's fantastic to see that giving words of recognition and appreciation. Um, I I think it's really important to to try to take people at the context. So I'm glad to see that folks are talking about discussing the news or events. It's very difficult to start a meeting when something really bad is going on outside, or something difficult is happening at work, or some news is some rumor is in the works. So it just not addressing it just simply keeps people disconnected. Seeing it, giving everyone a chance to check in. One of the groups I'm on is every other Wednesday night. We actually take a few minutes to check in, and it actually is quite. It took me a while to get comfortable with that, I have to say. But now I can't wait until I check in. It's sort of a fun way to start. I'm glad to see we have very few responses on focusing on the big problem or urgent matter, because people need a little time. Again, we all have been on Zoom calls where everyone's head is somewhere, and then sort of the boss just starts right into the big problem. It's just you're just not ready yet. You just need a little time to connect with each other, and realizing that there are anxieties that people have, especially during this time with the pandemic, with a variety of other things that are going on. You know, at least one of our callers has at least 20 different problems going on at the same time, you know, all external kind of thing. So you can't possibly just start into the issues without just giving people a sense to just check in a little bit. So it's great. If if these are not expressive of all the ideas you have, please add anything else. We're going to tabulate these these ideas and send them out, because that is one of the things we were hoping to do on this call today, on this webinar, is to send back to you some ideas on how to make better connections on Zoom. But again, the whole point, and I think we will say this at least a couple of times, is we are in a Zoom era, or we are using Zoom as a metaphor for a lot of other virtual. And we're not sort of lamenting what we lost. Yes, we have lost that human touch connection that we used to see, the water cooler conversations, the let's go to lunch, let's see what's going on conversations. We don't have that at the moment. So we're in this. And both Lola and I really believe that you can still make good connections through this medium. And in fact, even make more connections, as at least from my experience. I am now talking with people I haven't talked to for a long time, because it's so easy to get them on Zoom. So, and it's so easy to see them. You know, what I used to just do on the telephone, now I see them. So, you know, they're just things that are maybe a little bit better in some ways, or they are what they are, and we just sort of figure out how to make it work.
Thank you for sharing that. You said something really important I want to touch base.
Sure.
And you're saying that to recognizing words of recognition and appreciation are so incredibly important, especially in times like this, because we do lose that moments when you can walk by the office and say, oh, I really liked what you did in the other time, you know, in the meeting. Oh, I really like when you said something like this. Those little moments, even the water cooler conversation, we lost that opportunity for those small conversations to happen. And the other day, the manager said, Lola, it's so hard. I used to walk around the office and just tell people and just ask about their families, about this. I was able to have these conversations. Now it's so hard for me to, I have to have an appointment, right? And that appointment makes it so transactional for us. I also want to recognize some of the chats. Chip, it's so nice to see you here. He said, my job at work takes roughly an hour. So 7 hours are devoted to leadership building, innovations, and emotional connection. I love this, Chip. This is why I'm so happy. It makes this a priority. And that's so true. If we can, and I tell this to managers, if you can set aside you know, time in meetings for emotions to share and to be there for each other and to learn, right? To teach people how to do that, everything else becomes so much quicker to accomplish. One of the things that one bank manager told me, it said, like, by getting emotionally connected, we take out noise, take away the noise that is out there, and we can accomplish so much more in a shorter period of time. So Chip, great job. I love that. All right, Ramin, tell us about productivity.
So I want to talk a little bit about this because this productivity issue, of course, has always been on the forefront of a lot of the conversations we have in management. And what's interesting is if you look at the series of articles that are coming from a lot of different places, whether they're HBR, McKinsey, MIT, a lot of other management kind of conversations, they're all starting to consolidate on this concept of emotions being recognized at work. Now, they use emotional intelligence, they use words like recognizing grief and loss and recognizing anxieties, but they all are really about the same concept, which is that when people are carrying around hurt feelings, they are not as productive as they could be, perhaps even non-productive at all. I sort of compare it to a backpack. When you have a hurt relationship with someone whom you depend on at work and you interact with, you are carrying this backpack with the weight in it of the emotions that are there. And yes, you may get used to it. You may say, oh, this is just the way it is. I got to carry this backpack around all the time. But at some point, you start to get tired. Your legs don't get any stronger. You just get tired. That's the difference. And that if you solve one, but you don't really solve the underlying issues, if you don't really take the time to make the emotional connection, the backpack fills up again. And it fills up with another one. And we see this with our colleagues when we're on Zoom calls with them. We see the ones who are carrying the backpacks of some feeling or another. So I think part of the challenge with productivity is realizing is not the content. And that's the other message of this webinar is it's not the content, but it's the emotions. Because the emotions are driving all the other aspects of what's going on. When people don't trust each other or don't share the same values or don't believe that someone is going to be there for them, these come through on the Zoom calls, and they just simply, because of the disconnected medium of Zoom, just add to it.
That when people do not know and do not learn how to work with emotions, how to address emotions, they get stuck. They want to run because it hurts. Ramin, I like what you're saying. Hurt feelings really create stressful situations for us when we don't address it. And in hurt feelings, fear is the biggest emotion that we have. So go ahead. That was a great example. Thank you.
So thank you. So I'll try not to move away when this happens. But it's just about the fact that I think we get very focused in our business world about the fact that we are supposed to make X things happen on a meeting or in a call or during the day, not realizing that we're trying to do it with people, and not realizing that if there are hurt feelings, if there are misunderstandings, if there are emotional walls that have been put up, that we're simply just doing it by ourselves, really. We're not really doing it with that other person, but they're not really participating fully with us. And I know that you want to talk about sort of this whole notion of how interactions are really, I think we should see them in a different way, perhaps, and I think it's really exciting to hear that. So go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Ramin. Thank you. And I do love this analogy of if you think of interaction as a dance, emotion is the music of the dance. And to change the dance, we really have to change the music. You can't teach people to dance a waltz if there's tango music is playing, right? It's like almost impossible. I don't know how many people on the call know dancing or do dancing. I love dancing. And my husband and I used to take ballroom dancing for many years. We used to go competitions. It was so fun. And then we started to learn the Argentine tango. Now, if you know anything about the Argentine tango, in the Argentine tango, it's not like a regular traditional tango where you have a set of steps and you have a routine. In the Argentine tango, the dance is improvised, just like our interactions. All the interactions are improvised. And if you watch the Argentine tango, you can really immediately tell amateur dancers from the professionals is the way they tune into each other, the way they can be fully present. And I remember a teacher, the first lesson when we took, I don't know, years ago, this teacher said, do you see, the Argentine tango is a different kind of a dance, because in order to tango, you have to be completely focused, totally present, fully engaged, and tuned in. But you probably have no idea what I'm talking about. And so I had to learn that. And so in interactions, if we slow things down, we'll learn how to slow things down. We really start to see the emotion behind the interaction that is driving people, that is moving people into different ways. So if you think like Zoom as a dance floor, you can see people, some are on the dance floor, and some people are kind of like maybe standing on the sideline of a dance floor. And once you bring that emotional music into your Zoom meetings or any meetings, when you go back to work, you start to notice how people dance together. You start to observe what's going on. What kind of dance are they dancing? Is one dancing polka and the other one dancing tango? And so it really becomes a dynamic start to change. And you start to learn how to, the emotional connection process and the EmC process, you learn how to change that music so people are dancing to the same music. I'm going to show you 70 seconds of tango, Argentine tango, just for fun. It's not a dramatic tango over the top like you see in movies. It's a real tango. It's a tango as a bonding conversation. Every time I watch it, it like takes my breath away. But when you look at these two people, you see a flow of conversation. You see that connection. I'm leading our research group, and in the emotional connection, we are trying to find out the effectiveness of the EmC course. And when we work together as 7 people or 6 people on the call, on the Zoom meeting, and I feel that connection with them, it's like we're in a flow. Everybody's participating, providing great ideas. We follow through with things. I don't have to remind people that they have to do things. So this is what we're talking about. And so I want to take a moment to review some of the concepts about emotion. Emotion is the most powerful thing in the room. It is the most powerful agent of change. And we need to know how to work with emotions because it is what drives us. It is what drives our actions, our responses, our decisions. In any way we can understand emotions, we will make change of emotions because we know how to go into emotions. Emotions tells us what matters. Just like Ramin pointed out, in any disconnection, in any conflict, in any argument, in any context, when people get stuck, it's not about content, it's about emotions. What's happening? Why people are so rigid? Why they're not open and sharing ideas or being open to take other options? It's because there's some emotion this is happening. And when we know how to articulate emotion, how to make it granular, Lisa Feldman Barrett, she talks about making emotion as granular. When we can be as specific as possible with recognizing and understanding about emotions and what we experience, we become less overwhelmed. So emotion tells us what matters. If you get lost in the conversation, you need to go back to that hot moment of that emotion and you will know where to go there. Move the team forward. We are not wired to function without emotions. So we know how to handle it, how to work with it, how to allow space for it. And we need to make friends with it and use it for change.
At first, I love the dance thing. I usually have a problem with the whole dance business. People often ask, "What music are you dancing to?" So obviously, it's not the music everyone else is hearing, but we'll pass that. I think that the challenge really is this notion of being of understanding our emotions. But the problem is we don't always know what to do with it. We don't always know what to do when someone is sharing emotions with us. There's an acronym that Lola has in her program. It's called ARE, which is basically stands for accessible, being present is sort of the first thing we can do. It's not that difficult. Just be there, and being responsive to the emotions that are being shared, and being engaged in the conversation, and being engaged with that person. So I think that's one of the important recognitions. The other important recognition, and I'm sure there are people on the call and others who say, well, sure, I've got a problem with someone else, but they're not coming to the dance floor. I'm on the dance floor. I'm listening to the music. And what can I do by myself? And you can do something by yourself, because just simply going to what you were saying earlier, going back to the moment and trying to understand what were the emotions, just recognizing your own emotions, recognizing your own responses to those emotions, recognizing how much of it was your responses and how much of it was automatic without you even thinking, and recognizing how those particular emotions put you in a cycle that just simply perpetuated the negativity is a great step. And then perhaps even thinking about what the other person may be going through. That's another step. So what Lola is saying is, of course, works best if you have two people and they all hearing the same music. But I wanted to just make sure I got this in, that there are things, just recognizing your own emotions is a huge thing. And it's certainly something that I have learned to find very valuable. So we want to just take a moment, because we know that no matter what we try, and we have a lot of people here on this call who want to try to make connections, we always have somebody who is disengaged. We always have, some one or two people who are just simply somewhere else. And so we want to just throw that question out to you, and to see what your strategy is for re-engaging those people. So if you wouldn't mind putting up that third question, Lola, then we can talk about it for a few minutes before we begin to sort of wrap up the program.
All right, I'm launching our third question. How do you re-engage people who are disconnected or appear disinterested in your Zoom meetings? Okay, create participation opportunities, great. Hey, to have sidebar conversations through chat or Slack, okay. Recognize people's importance to the overall objectives, excellent. Acknowledge differences of opinions or concerns, excellent. Okay, ignore the problem, okay. People provide enough time for meetings, yeah, to provide enough time for meetings to fully connect with each other, excellent. Yeah, so I'm going to end the poll. So as you can see, that's great. I love that. Create participation opportunities is the 78%, which is fantastic. Go ahead, Ramin.
Yeah, so it's fantastic to see so much of that. It's good to see that not too many people want to ignore. I think ignore does just simply puts things out there. One of the important, I think, recognitions is that sometimes there isn't enough time to fully connect with people.
Yeah.
And I think we have to recognize that. We do that in real life when we see someone is really troubled or there's something going on or that they're not involved. We find other times. And I think we have to do the same thing in the Zoom world, where we just have to take the time, maybe not in this meeting, maybe in a post meeting, maybe in a sidebar conversation, maybe in some other setting, but we need to find that time as managers and leaders. And glad to see the recognition as being important. That's certainly critical for people to feel they're being heard, they're being seen, they're being part of the process. And if that may help them at that point just simply start to come into the picture if they're feeling disengaged. Meeting with people before or after the meeting. So that's great. I think it's good to start to now think a little bit about how all this sort of comes together.
I do want to just note some of the chat, some of the comments that are coming on. So Louis is correct, acknowledgement versus agreement. Like when we acknowledge somebody else's emotions or feelings, it's not necessarily we agree with what they're saying, but we agree with their experience. We acknowledge that they're worried. We acknowledge that they're concerned. Maybe we acknowledge that there's some fear going on. So, and they validate each person's concern. Really important, not just shut people out because we don't have time, but to say like, look, we can definitely, I hear your concerns. Let maybe talk after the meetings, and I hear you concerns. Maybe we can take off this meeting and really slow things down. Emotions are fast, and we learn how to slow things down. We can give each person's voice to be heard and to be acknowledged. So that's really important.
This is one of the, I'm glad you brought that up, Lola. This is one of the biggest challenges I had as I was learning this process, or just learning to just be more responsive, is this notion of acknowledgement versus agreement. Because somewhere, I don't know where the programming was put into my brain, which was that acknowledgement is agreement. And so therefore I didn't want to agree with whatever that the person was saying to me. But I think it's important to just recognize, no, that programming is wrong. It's that you can acknowledge someone's feeling, you can let them be heard, you can be there for them at that very moment. Their experience is their experience. I mean, you cannot say that it is wrong, it's just there. And not defend, because that's not what they're doing. They're just simply saying, this is what I experienced. Anyway, I'm glad that this was brought up in the notes. And there's another question. It says, how to recognize someone, and whether recognizing someone in a meeting, I assume it's being someone who's being disengaged, is a good or a bad thing. And I think that's certainly a judgment call by the leader of the group. But finding ways for that person to engage, even in the smallest part of the conversation, even in a way where there can be just a general agreement about the objective, that allows that person to find their way back into the conversation. What I wanted to talk about is to just be very clear about, I think, the concept of emotions and content. It is that there is a reprogramming that we all have to go through in some ways. And I feel like it's taken me sometimes to really understand it, which is that emotions are a necessary concept in the conversation. They are more critical than anything else. And that if we really consider not talking about them, then we're just simply fooling ourselves in some ways in creating workplaces where people just come in a transactional way with us. And that realizing that when people are connected, we've seen it, we all have seen it, we all seen those scenarios. One of the questions I often ask when I meet with groups is tell me a time when you were thriving, right? I use the example of thriving, and then I say, you tell me what you think it means and tell me a time. And everyone can go to some specific time where they will describe things like, I was growing, I was happy, I was connected, I was jiving, I was in sync, we were working together towards something, we each brought something to the table, we complemented each other's weaknesses or strengths, and they're always the same. Doesn't matter where you go when you ask this question, that the answer is always these kinds of things. So they all happen because there were positive emotion and emotional connections in the room during those times. And so I think that's really the critical point that I want to make, and turn it over to you to talk more about sort of how to deal with lost emotional connections and how to work through relationships.
Yeah, thank you, Ramin. And somebody did pose the question, that it was interesting questions. How do you address when somebody's ignoring you? And that's really hard. It's so hard for us when somebody is ignoring us or rejecting us or feel like we're not important. So it's really, really hard. So what we have to do, we have to learn how to express that emotion in a safe way. So we don't come across demanding or blaming or criticizing or lecturing. We come across from a vulnerability moment and say, a point of view, and say, it's really hard for me when I'm being ignored in a meeting. Now, it doesn't mean that the other person is going to be able to respond to your vulnerability, but that's okay. It's a good idea to always to start with vulnerable feelings, because then you create more safety. So to say, I feel sad when we are not able to share, or I feel concerned, or I feel confused or surprised. And I do feel like maybe what I'm saying is not important. So you provide that person an opportunity to be in your experience in a safe way. Again, and I say that in a safe way, because when people ignore us, it's not that they don't want to hear us. It's not that they don't want to connect with us. It's they're struggling. They're struggling with their own emotions. So we need to be able to reach out to them or to help them. But in order for us to do that, we have to be in an emotional balance. Emotional balance is when we can slow things down and calmly to talk about what each experience is about. What is my experience is about, and what your experience is about. That we can have this open conversation. That's what balance is. Balance is being able to tune into our own emotions, our needs, and our fears, and able to coherently articulate that in a clear way. The way we create a stronger team in our meetings is to learn about our relationships, to learn about the emotional connection process, so that you can have the tools, you can have the roadmap to get to that point where you can create emotional balance for yourself and for others in your meetings. Ramin, do you want to add a few things? And
talk maybe a little bit more about the process, and just I think we're talking about a lot of issues that are not easy for people to do. They're easy to understand, but very difficult to do. I think it's very difficult to be vulnerable, especially when you're in an environment where hostility has been sort of the norm. You feel like people are hostile toward you, as one of our people here on the webinar said in the message to you. What do you do when people are ignoring you? Yes. There's a certain sense of hostility perhaps that's being felt on that. So, but I think that the idea is figuring out how to do it. And maybe you need to practice it quietly for a while until you're able to practice it out loud. But the idea is realizing that when you come to things from that space of vulnerability, you actually create this possibility for solutions. I can tell you that it is really hard to do, and so I'm not saying it's easy, but I think people will have to try it, and you're going to tell them a little bit about sort of how it might work.
Yes, and I will. And you said such an important thing. It is hard to learn. And I think any new dance, when you learn, it's hard to do, right? In order to be comfortable or just like in anything that you do, you have to practice a lot, and you are going to fall. You're going to lose your balance in moments when you're practicing. But as the time goes by, and the time will go by anyway, you're going to learn something incredible. And I think my life has certainly changed since I've learned the process and I've been using it. And my kids' life and my grandkids, I don't know if anybody saw my story on LinkedIn about my grandson, Noah, who was able to come to his friend and say, look, I wasn't there for you then, but I'm here for you now. Do you need a hug? Do you want me to tell you how important you are? Because you are important to me. And the friend, tears started running down his cheeks because nobody ever told him this thing. The emotional connection process is not easy to learn how to work with emotions because they're invisible, they're fast. But once we recognize what we need, and we all need love and care and people to be there for us. We all need support and encouragement in moments of vulnerability. We all need that. No matter if you're 9-year-old or 99 years old, we all need that. And John Bowlby, who's the father of attachment theory, said that our need for attachment and for connection does not end at age 12. It goes from the cradle to the grave. EmC process, you learn how to be fully present, fully engaged, creating synchrony together with your team. Because it's on target. It focuses on key variables of who we are and how we engage with each other. It is a natural process, it's organic, and it's addressing emotions in a safe and secure way, helping you to create bonding conversations. So you can create this delicacy of this web of mutual influence that we can sense and detect in processing of emotions and small changes in human face. I don't know if you know this, but the science shows that we can read other people's facial expression in 100 milliseconds. And we can mirror by observance in 300 milliseconds to know how they feel just from facial expressions. And so the last thing is it's a roadmap. The EmC process is the roadmap to connection. It gives you the tools, helpful, valuable tools, and the language that you can do to create connection, confidence, and strength in your team and your collaborations with each other. I want to take just a few minutes to answer questions. We do have one question that I'd like to answer. Ramin, before I answer, maybe you want to...
No, go ahead. Go ahead. We're
okay.
Doing good.
So the question posed is, how do I feel less anxious? I feel like I make more mistakes working virtually, mostly little ones, small ones, right? And if I was in a normal work environment where things like typos or corrections would be fixed, no problems. But now it creates a lot of anxiety. How do I feel more comfortable? Because I feel like I'm on edge. So Jennifer, thank you very much for this question. It's such an understandable question. I got you. That's right. We all feel more anxious and more stressed. We all make mistakes, and that's just normal for us to do that. So if I would be taking you through the EmC process, I would create safety where you could share those experiences with your team, with your boss, with your colleagues, and how it may be embarrassing it is sometimes when we do make mistakes. And that would open a door for them to respond and to be there for you. And I would help them and lead them into saying, you know, Jennifer, we all make mistakes. It's so hard, and I can assure you that you are competent, you're smart, and there's nothing wrong with you when you make mistakes in this anxious time. And I affirm, right there, it's so good to share that experience. So it's really hard when we are emotionally isolated. Again, I want to point out that in the EMC process, we're obsessed with people not feeling alone. And through even the Zoom meeting, I have sessions on Zoom meetings all the time. Through even on Zoom meeting where people are, hundreds of miles away from each other, they are connected, they are in sync because they can speak that emotional language. So I do want to thank you so much for being with us. It's so great to share this experience with you. Thank you so much. Please come again to our webinar next month. And it really shows clearly how much you care about your work relationships, how important these work relationships are to you, and how you want to have a way to nurture them so you can thrive and grow in your work and your team. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very nice. Thank you.